So that's all my undercoating done. I'm going to dry brush some grey onto the legs here, because what I've found before with speed paints is if you just put them on something very dark, then their sort of shading effect doesn't show up very well. So I'm just going to use some grey to dry brush on here. And over that I'm going to put some algae green Army Painter speed paint. And I'm just going to bring that algae green up into the arms as well, because that's going to make a nice base for the lighter green, I think. And the undersides of the wings as well. And from there I'm going to dry brush with some Citadel Uruk Flesh base, just to bring out some highlights. And I'm also going to give the upper surface of the wings a sort of watered down wash of this green as well. Those then are my basic greens done. That's the body and wings covered in the first coat. Everything's looking fine. I'm going to turn my attention to the tentacles next. Now, I could keep these green as well, but I thought it would be nice to make these worm-like, vermiculate, to quote Clark Ashton Smith. You know, that sort of reddy, pinky colour that you get in worms. I thought that would look quite horrible. And I've got two paints here, Citadel paints. Now, I've never used either of these paints before. We've got a shade called Caraberg Crimson. So that's going to be the top part of the tentacles. And that's going to go down to this contrast paint, which has the wonderful title of Volupus Pink. I'm not sure if volupus is a real word or not, but it sounds like it should be. But I do like the sound of that. As I said, I've never used these particular paints before, so I don't know how they're going to work on the green undercoat. That's actually green with a bit of black at the tip here. I don't know if they're going to work well on that or not. So I'm going to do a little test bit at the top. If they don't work so well, then it might be I've got to re-undercoat the tentacles in a white or a light grey. But let's give them a try, see how it looks. Yeah, I don't think that's quite the look I'm going for. So what I'm going to do is wipe that off. I'm going to recoat the tentacles. I might even do them in a sort of red colour. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to lay this over the top, going into the pink. So I'm going with a coat de arms brick red. And I'm going to tint that a little bit with a purple swarm. Yeah, that's a better base colour to work from, I think. I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to lighten the tips so we get more of a contrast with the pink. Now, while I've got this purple out, I'm going to start going over some other little bits and pieces. Some of these raised bumps. There's a couple of sort of veins, I suppose they are, that stand out as well. And I'm going to look also at putting some purple onto the wings. So while I've got my purple speed paint out, that's what I'm going to do next. And I thought while I'm doing that, I'll also do the claws or the talons in this purple as well. Depending on how that comes out, I might go over those later on. But for now, we'll fill those in with the purple. Thing is, with these, you don't want them to look too sort of nail varnishy, if you know what I mean. You know, so that might turn out a bit like that. If it does, then I might go over in black or something else. That's that first layer of purple done then. Actually, it doesn't look too bad on the claws. It's not quite as vivid as I had feared. And I filled in a lot of those little bumps on the skin and the veins or arteries or whatever the equivalent is. I've just gone over those as well. Now, for the tentacle tips, sounds like it should be the name of a band, the tentacle tips. I'm going to just do those tips in cold flesh. This is one of my D&D colours. Just to really lighten those up, and hopefully that will make our pink even more bright and vivid. So I'm just going to blend that in on the tips there next. And you'll see I've also started filling the underside of the wings with a bit of purple there as well. I'm going to try something for this, but I'll speak about that in a moment. Let's do the tips first. That's our tentacle tips undercoated in that sort of off-white. While that is drying, I'm going to experiment. And I'm going to experiment with some fluorescent paints that I recently bought. It's a pack of 6 Meaden paints, including fluorescent purple. There's also a fluorescent blue, green, pink, orange, and a sort of yellow. I'm going to apply some of this across the top wings here and see if I can blend it in. I haven't got a clue what it's going to come out like. I haven't really used these yet, apart from one little dot. That certainly looks nice and vivid, doesn't it? Alright, let's give it a try. And I'm going to water it down a bit because it is it's quite thick actually. So let's just add a little bit of water into that. I don't think for the price they were, I don't think these are going to be as good quality paints as your army painters and your citadels and such like. But fluorescent, who can resist that? No, it's not going on very easily at all. I don't know if that's because of the undercoat. But I shall persist. I'll get this wing done and then let it dry and we'll see what it looks like. Sometimes I found, particularly with what you might call sort of different or specialist paints, you have to let them dry because you don't get the full effect until they dry out. Well, there's a kind of effect. I'm not sure if it was the one I was going for, but it's sort of done something that might be interesting to put something over. I'm certainly not going to leave it like that. Yeah, I guess this is the lesson, isn't it? You buy cheap paints and you'll find they're actually quite difficult to work with. They seem to work okay on edges, but for getting coverage with those, not so good. Maybe they're designed more for craft than modelling. Anyway, I'm going to set all this aside now, so we'll let that fluorescent paint dry. We'll let our tentacles dry. Oh, now, see, that looks quite interesting underneath. That looks much more fluorescent there, where it's gathered in little drips and drops. So maybe there is something to be said for it. Perhaps it's best just to use it in little dots like that. So that might be the way ahead with those. I'm certainly planning to use one of the colours for the eyes, maybe the fluorescent orange. If that comes out like that, then that should look okay. But anyway, I'm going to set all this aside for today. I'm going to leave our little beastie there, and I'm going to come back once everything is dry. Let's get into our volupus pink then. And then the top part of the tentacles with some Carroburg crimson. I'm going to go over the tops of the wings again. Another daring experiment. I'm using Army Painter Speed Paint Hive Dweller Purple, and I'm going to see if I can mix it in a little bit with that fluorescent purple, because I do want to bring the brightness up a bit as well. No idea how this is going to work. Could go horribly wrong, but let's give it a try. Obviously, as a speed paint, the Hive Dweller is quite liquidy, and that fluorescent paint is very thick, so let's just see what we get. Going to water that down a little bit more, I think. Now that is getting more like the effect I wanted. So quite a bit of water in there. So I'm able to use this almost like a wash, really, and put it on in blotches. I'm sort of thinking now, a bit like the colourings or markings of some moths. You know, they have those sort of camouflage blotches on the wings. So let's go for that kind of effect. Alright, well that's starting to look interesting. It's not quite the effect I planned or had in mind when I started. But you know, that's how these things often work out. You never know how a particular paint is going to go onto the model, how different paints are going to mix. And sometimes when something goes a bit wrong, it actually produces an interesting result. Didn't Bob Ross call those happy accidents or something like that? Anyway, I'm going to let those wings dry a bit. I'm going to come back and stipple those some more. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to use this fluorescent orange yellow just to fill in the eyes. I don't know if it's going to be best using a brush or a cocktail stick for that, because as I say, this paint is rather thick. And this really is a very vivid orange, so hopefully it's going to do the job. There'll be a wash going into this as well, so I'm not too fussed about keeping it totally tidy. But yeah, I think that's a good start. Alright, and the other side. So with this paint being thick, it does kind of dry up very quickly. So if you do use this, just put a little bit out at a time, and you've got to use it pretty much straight away. See, already this is not going on quite the same as the first eye. There we go, that's the eye filled in anyway. As I say, once I put a wash in there, that will just tidy that up a bit. I'm going to just add a little bit more into the corner. And I'm going back to that volupus pink as well, because it's quite dark. I'm just using it on these sort of horns and the tips of the wings as well, just as a bit of a contrast colour there. And I think, as I may have mentioned in the last video, I was originally going to get the airbrush out to do the wings. They get a sort of a sort of graded fade from one colour into the other, but I actually like this look more now. It's quite unusual, I think. Now I've had another shade of green arrive while all that was drying. This is Speed Paint, Army Painters again, Charming Chartreuse, and it looks like quite a dark green. I'm going to give this a go now, just to fill in some of the nooks and crannies here. Hopefully get a little bit of contrast working in. I might also use this for the underside of the wings, because at the moment the undersides are pretty plain, so I'm possibly going to give those a coat of that. But we'll see how this goes on. So yeah, that's going on very nicely. So I shall work the rest of that now. That charming chartreuse has worked out such a nice colour. I've actually pretty much used it to cover the whole body again. As I say, it's a speed paint and with a bit of a thin wash as well. That's turned out really nice. It's a little bit more of the sort of vibrant green I was looking for than those other ones. Looks slightly more aquatic, I think. So I'm going to do the head in that as well. I'll start off with quite a thin wash and then I'll layer it in to see how that goes. Again, I don't want to totally cover everything, but we do want to work into a lot of this nice detail here. So I'd rather have it too watery at first than not. That will start running into all these little creases and crevices, I hope. There we go. Then for the crown of the head, I'll just give that a normal coat. That's the head done, and I've also coated the underside of the wings in that green as well, that chartreuse. I also want to just do something extra with the tentacles. I want to make these a little bit lighter at the tips, get a little bit more of a contrast in as we go down, and perhaps make that fade a little more pronounced. So I'm not sure what colours I'm going to use for that yet. I do have, in terms of pinky type colours, I've got a D&D Ethereal Spectre, which again is very vivid, so I might experiment with that. So, Ethereal Spectre, and I'm just going to touch the tip of the tentacles. Touch the tip of the tentacles. Yeah, that's a little bit much. I'm going to dry brush that in a little more. Try to get that blend. Yeah, definitely needs less paint on the brush for that. But that's kind of starting to get there. I hope the focus on this is okay as well. It's a bit difficult to see because I'm using an action camera. They're not really designed so much for close-in work. Though this one has got quite a good zoom on it. But apologies if that does keep going out of focus a bit. Finding one camera that does everything is pretty difficult. I do have a camcorder that's got very good close-up capability, but the sound recording is awful, you know, so sometimes you can't win. I'm being very careful. I think a lot less paint on the brush, definitely, and just very gradually blend that in. Do you do this when you paint? Do you sort of, you know, this is why I've got purple all over my hands. I had to go out this morning, I taught a class, and afterwards I noticed I actually had more than this, a load of purple paint. No one ever asks or mentions anything. I wonder where they think it comes from. Do I have to explain I was painting a star spawn of Cthulhu this morning? Okay, so I'm going to finish the rest of this. I think it's always easier to go back and add dark paints in, or to darken it, rather than to lighten, because a wash, of course, is much easier to apply than your dry brushing. So I'll do the rest of this and we'll see how things stand. So we're getting there then, we're nearly finished, I think. A couple of things left to do. I'm not really happy with the undersides of the wings like that. They look a bit drab compared to the top. I don't know that I want to repeat exactly that same pattern on the underside, but I'm going to lighten them up. So I'm using my Ethereal Spectre again, and I'm going to mix in a little bit of pastel lavender. I'll see what they look like lightened up. I might put a pattern on there of some description, or maybe just a wash. The other thing is to do something with the base. Probably just going to put some scatter on that, keep it pretty plain and straightforward. And then an overall wash in my Innsmouth green to finish, and a spray of varnish, and then hopefully we're done. So let's get these underwing colours ready. I've got a few bits here I'm going to use on the base. I've got two different colours of very fine scatter. That's almost like sand stuff. So I'm just going to mix these together here. And I've got a jar full of rocks as well, or small stones. I'll put a couple of those in just to break up the smoothness of the base. So we're going to just use normal PVA glue. That's the basing finish then. And I always think, even with a simple and straightforward base like this, it really does do something to start to bring the figure to life. And I'm just going to wait for under the wings to dry off. I'm going to go over those again, maybe with one or two colours, and also go over those, what are they called? Wing struts? I'm not sure what the biological name is for those. I guess in a bird there'd be the bones, right? I'm not sure if Starspawn have bones or not. But anyway, I'll go over them again. Everything will then get the dreaded Innsmouth wash, and it will be time to varnish. So that's the undersides of the wings finished. I've gone for a bit of a mottled scheme, a bit like the top but not quite as busy. All that remains now is the Innsmouth wash. This is something I made myself. I put the video up a few weeks back. Just a very thinned out greenish wash. I'm not going to apply this too heavily, mostly to the base and to the lower body, perhaps a bit to the wings. We'll see how that works out. So let's just start with the legs here. Now when this goes on, it does look very thick, but when it dries out it largely disappears. And there's our finished Starspawn. Looking quite resplendent, I think. Overall, I'm very happy with how that's come out, especially the wings. That was not planned, something quite unexpected and different, but as we say, happy accidents. Yeah, I really like that sort of blotchy or leprous look. It's kind of the word I'm looking for, I think. Leprous. The only thing I might have changed and done a little bit different is the tentacles. They're not quite got that worminess that I was looking for. But, you know, part of the thing about painting a model or doing anything really is knowing when to stop. And as I say, it's always the same with a music mix. It's always surrendered, it's never finished. So when you've completed something, I think you can always look back and say, oh, maybe I should have done this a little bit different or that a little bit different. But that's lessons to learn for next time. And of course the main thing is you have to consider the overall effects on the table. And I think that's going to look really nice on the table. Maybe not to the players. Probably won't look nice to them. But it will give me some satisfaction. And of course, don't forget to check out XWC Miniatures, who made this very fine figure. Just one of their growing range of Lovecraftian entities. They've got some really great night gaunts as well, and various other things, plus human adventurers to pit them against. Do check out their website, and you can come and see them, of course, at the Innsmouth Literary Festival in September in Bedford, where this chap will no doubt be making an appearance as well. I'm very sure he's going to be popping up in one of the demo games we're running, which is going to be based on my fantasy skirmish rules, and of course is going to be set in Innsmouth. So keep an eye out on the channel as well, both for We Want the Gold, the playtests we're doing at the moment, and of my ongoing Innsmouth build, which I'm just about to get stuck into some of the buildings for that. The other thing I was thinking of with this figure is, yes, in 28mm it makes an excellent Star Spawn of Cthulhu, but if I put it on my 10mm table, then I reckon we've got a pretty good Cthulhu as well. So there's something to think about. Perhaps in my upcoming Bane Wars Fantastic Battles campaign, I'm going to have to write in a Cthulhu somewhere. As always, I welcome your comments, questions and suggestions, particularly if you've got any tentacular tips for vermiculated tentacles. I'll be very interested to know if anyone else has got this figure as well, and to see how you've painted it, what colour schemes you've come up with. Because of course the great thing with this stuff is you can do whatever you want. There's no official book of colours. Perhaps you might even invent a new colour. A colour out of space, wouldn't that be great? So thanks very much for watching today, folks. As always, please do like, share and subscribe. I'll see you next time, and in the meantime, don't forget... Cthulhu vertragen.